the CEO founder of RugDoc.io and Paladin Blockchain Security, and I'm going to try this a little bit more back to basics from the talk we just had. And we're going to talk a little bit about user safety for you, the investors, in DeFi. All right, so we're all here because we clearly see the potential and the promise in DeFi, right? There is so much going on. In the last year, just in 2021 alone, the market cap for all DeFi tokens, and I'm talking like all your random farm tokens, all the big tokens, like anything that's used in DeFi, it ballooned from 1.7 billion to 170 billion. 1 year, huge increase. And on top of that, this is also mirrored by all of the capital flowing into DeFi. Everything flowing into these protocols skyrocketed from $1 billion to $250 billion. However, I'm sure as we've all figured out, and I know I figured out, which is why I'm even here today, 10.5 billion was lost in the same exact time period because scams are everywhere. And scams can range from like the silliest little things, almost like phishing, someone impersonating someone to try and grab your keys, to straight up thefts, those rug pulls that we all hate so much. Some estimates of loss to DeFi scams, and again, all scams, just people like losing their money, is $3 trillion total. It's a huge cause for concern, of course, because as we see all of this increase and all of this capital flowing into DeFi and all of this emerging Web3 industry, it's a huge deterrent. So this isn't just a problem to you, the investor, of course, although it is because it's your funds at stake ultimately. This should be a cause for concern of anybody who is looking to try and grow and develop this entire industry. All right. Everybody has a little bit of a different set of concerns, right? Just like how when you're an investor, you have a different strategy or a different goal than your neighbor or your friend. Everybody's going to have a different set of concerns when they're investing in DeFi, and that means that there's going to be a different set of threats that you're protecting yourself against. Threats are not unique to the individual because they're also going to impact the people around you, right? So say you're a developer, right? If we're talking about this particular demographic, perhaps a developer is concerned about surveillance technologies. Maybe they're in a country that's hostile to DeFi and they need to keep things really under wraps. Or perhaps they're just concerned, if you're going to be the next big thing that someone's going to try and come in and just steal your idea. Perhaps they're concerned about physical location tracking. Phishing is absolutely a huge thing because phishing grabs your keys and your logins and all of these things that are going to be ultimately controlling your protocol. You might also be concerned about key loggers, somebody being able to track like what you yourself are typing, because that's another way that your logins or your keys could be found. Maybe you're concerned about who your teammates even are, because in DeFi so many people are anonymous, right? When you're hiring that developer, when you're hiring that marketer, who are they? You may not know, and that's a huge cause for concern because it seems like almost every day, at least twice a week, we get a team who's had funds stolen from them by, whatever marketer, whatever developer that they just hired and has access to their contracts. Of course, contract exploits are a huge cause for concern, right? We see with all of the capital rushing in, we've seen the emergence of the entire audit industry for smart contracts because contracts get exploited all the time. It's sometimes very, very easy for someone who's a malicious actor to just come in, exploit your contract and absolutely drain it. Just drain the protocol or just dump your tokens or just cause some sort of like a huge problem for you and your community. And of course, there's just regular boring malware, right? You click the wrong site that's targeted towards you, especially if you get an email that seems like it's directed towards you. And the next thing you know, everything is bogged down, slow, and you can't launch on time. So there's all sorts of different concerns that you, if you were a developer, might be wanting to think about. And this is going to have some overlap, but ultimately a reasonable amount of contrast with the crypto holder. So if you're just an investor, if you're just a holder, you're also prone to a lot of these similar attacks, right? But you're also going to get a couple more that are targeted at you. The biggest one that you've probably come across is going to be just plain old financial attacks, like cyber criminal attacks, right? So maybe it's somebody who's trying to get you to send a wire for their grandma who has diabetes, or maybe it's someone who's trying to just, go in and pretend to be someone else. So you feel comfortable and you give them your information. Or sometimes maybe you went to a big forum, like you're having a problem with your MetaMask login, right? Who's ever done that? You've had a problem with your MetaMask login, so you go to like one of their chat rooms and you say, hello, I'm having a problem. And the next thing you know, you have 20 scammers in your DMs who are trying to get you to give them the keys, right? It happens everywhere. That's just plain old boring, cybercrime attacks. They're going to link you to some website. You're going to click on the website, and then the next thing you know, you have to like change your keys, which is not a thing. Do not ever give anybody your keys. It could be commodity malware, so a ransomware attack, which is going to be kind of similar, where you're going to suddenly be threatened to give me 2 Bitcoin, or else I'm going to, reveal the secret folder that you keep on your desktop. It could also just be phishing, right? A lot of these have interacting scams. You just get lured to some website, you need to change your key, and then they've phished your key successfully. You could also get identity theft problems from a hacked centralized exchange. Centralized exchanges are sometimes more secure than DeFi, but often they're not, and they're centralized. And so if somebody figures out how to get into that centralization, everything. We've seen plenty of centralized exchanges get completely drained or get exploited or have identity theft or just have people's contact leaked, and you don't know where that's going to end up. And of course, in DeFi, there's just straight up rugs. You're going to go and you're trying to invest in the next $1 million swap farm, right? And it has 10,000 APR, and you are so excited for this. And so you go on in, and then next thing you know, it's just gone. The wonderful Ethereum that you just staked, poof, gone. Not great. Finally, there's also friends and family, which you may not even think about, but if we're thinking about all of these ways that your information can get phished and can get released, your friends and family are a perfect way to do that, or impersonating your friends and family. Because think of your mother, right? Your mother probably has no idea what DeFi is. She may not even know what crypto is. And so she, however, is related to you. And if someone really wants to get your stuff, your mom is probably not taking the same level of care with her personal security as you are, right? As someone who maybe, hopefully, is sort of savvy about cybersecurity since you're in DeFi. And so, her accounts can be used to extract information because, all of a sudden you get an email from mom, and mom says, oh, sorry, I lost my email. Here's my new email. Can you give me your login? And then the same login, the same password that you use for everything, all of a sudden somebody has that, and they just try a couple websites, and the next thing you know, something terrible has happened. So these are just more of these generic ways to think about cybersecurity, right? These are not necessarily explicit to DeFi, but we're going to talk about some ways that are going to be more specific to DeFi, right? There are so many ways that your account can get compromised. We've talked about phishing, of course, a compromised password. A lot of people don't use a password manager, and so you're going to have the same password for like 50 different websites, and that's not a good thing. It's great for you to remember it, but terrible idea in terms of cybersecurity. There's key logging, which is not the most common. There's fake support. There are SIM swap attacks. If we're at an event like this, right, there's always the potential for an evil twin Wi-Fi network, right? So an evil twin network basically is a fake Wi-Fi network that appears like a real Wi-Fi network. You log into that one, and people can suddenly see what you're doing on your screen. And it's a great way to also just like key log you, essentially. And of course, there's just all sorts of different types of social engineering, like that MetaMask support. They're impersonating someone that you actually care and need help with, and they're going to get your account recovery questions, or they're going to get your keys, or they're just going to get something. So let's talk about a little bit more DeFi-specific threats. Okay, so if you do nothing else, let's do a few things. Use two-factor authentication, always. Use a password manager. If you have problems remembering your password, so you just use the same password over and over again, there are plenty of great programs that essentially, use facial recognition or use some sort of like a one pass that you would make very complicated to just open up all of your passwords, and they'll just jumble up every single password and just give you a mixed one each time. Run the updates on your computer and your phone. They seem silly and they seem annoying, but often these updates are in response to a problem that has been found or some sort of an attack. Use a cold storage wallet. So often we're just using these hot wallets, these MetaMask wallets, or a centralized exchange wallet, right? And these are great and they're convenient. And this is how you're going to reach out and interact through Web3 with all of the wonderful DeFi protocols that we have out there, but they're not the most secure. So if you actually manage to like rack up a reasonable amount of funds or funds that you're not actively using, you should be keeping them in cold storage, like in a ledger. Because your MetaMask seed phrase ultimately is only a click away. It's very easy to go ahead and pull up your MetaMask seed phrase, right? Or whatever wallet that you're using. It's a lot harder to go and steal somebody's cold storage wallet. The more methods that you can switch up, the better it is. There's also physical security concerns. This is not the most common, but everybody talks about the $5 wrench attack, right? So we get so wrapped up in, all of this crazy encryption and all of the managers that we use. But, frankly, ultimately, we live in the real world. And so if somebody really wanted to come after you, you should be thinking at least somewhat about physical security concerns. And that's not just necessarily talking about the $5 wrench attack, because that is not particularly common. But the largest physical security concern is actually just protecting your stuff against being stolen. Especially here in Barcelona, if you're on the road like La Rambla at night, make sure you know where your phone is. So in most cases, you are very unlikely to be targeted specifically for crypto-related reasons. Most people aren't going to know that you are Crypto Joe. They just want to steal your cell phone, or they want to steal your wallet, or they want to steal your laptop, right? Because they think that that's the thing. But that could be an easy way, once they open up your phone, to find out that there is way more exciting things in your phone than just your phone to sell. You should always encrypt your hard drive, so if your device is stolen, only the physical device is compromised, not the data on it, right? Because then your data could be used for identity theft, you could get all sorts of problems that way. And also just be careful of what you say out loud and where, because depending what crowd you're in and who you're around, you can reveal quite a lot about yourself that you may not want revealed, and you may identify yourself as a target that you don't want known to certain crowds. All right, so let's talk about some of these DeFi-specific scams. Of course, there are those hard rugs, right? Those hard rugs are the really, truly disastrous things that happen when our funds just get completely stolen from us. And this is when you don't really know what the contract contains, because you have to remember, all DeFi protocols are written on smart contracts. Smart contracts control exactly what can and cannot happen in every parameter that is possible when you're interacting with something in DeFi. This is a beautiful thing, because it means that we can figure out what our risk parameters are. In a hard rug, there will be something encoded in that smart contract that lets them migrate your funds out, or turn your funds elsewhere, or send it to an address, or just send it somewhere else, and you will never see those funds again, and they are probably not recoverable. It is very, very rare that funds that are actually stolen in a DeFi protocol are recovered and sent to law enforcement. It's not impossible, and it's becoming more likely now than it used to be, but usually if something gets stolen from you, you can't expect to see it again, because this is decentralized finance. It's decentralized. So all of the beauty of being able to freely interact with the things that you want to interact with on your schedule means that there's no centralization. There's nobody to turn to, and there's nobody to run to who can control anything. Your funds are ultimately yours. There's some of these softer rugs, right? And these softer rugs are going to be in contrast to a hard encoded theft. These are going to usually be more human element sorts of scams. And so perhaps it's someone who doesn't fulfill, they have a bunch of tokens, and you didn't quite pay attention to the token allocation, and the developer has 70% of the tokens, and then the next thing you know, you've invested in this native token, and they just dump 70% of it, and they cash out and call it a day, and all of a sudden, whatever you invested is worth pennies, if that. There's a whole myriad of these, but basically it just means your funds are technically still there, but they're probably valueless. There's honeypot scams, and honeypot scams are when you have a token and the token essentially can't be sold anymore. So you have bought it, but you are unable to sell it. Only the developer can sell it. And so you've bought something and you put in, I don't know, $10, and all of a sudden you see this thing absolutely skyrocket and nobody is selling, and that price is just absolutely going crazy, and you want to cash out and you're $10 that just turned into $1,500, but you can't. But the developer can, because they're whitelisted or you're blacklisted. One of the two has happened. And so they're just going to go ahead and take all the funds, or just wait until that token price is worth a ton and then just dump it on you. There's also pre-sale thefts, and a pre-sale just means that you have given your funds to something and you're hoping to get some tokens ahead of the actual public sale, and they just never give it to you. They just take your money and they run. And this is the most easy, thoughtless scam that there is. So pre-sale scams are something that you really need to trust the team to do, because they're under no obligation. There's not even usually a smart contract here. Sometimes I've seen these things where it's just send funds to wallet, and you know what? Sometimes that shockingly works, and it's real and it's legitimate, even though it feels wrong, but sometimes it's not, and you've just given all of your Avalanche tokens, all of your AVAX has just gone to someone, and you're not getting anything ever again. And then finally, there's similar failure to receive an airdrop or an NFT. And you have signed up for some airdrop and you're expecting this token or this NFT to come to you, and you may have spent some funds on their previous project, and then you never get one. It never happens. So that's where we come in. Who are we? What do we do? What is Rugdock? We are a community-oriented, crowdsourced team of DeFi users, and we provide ethical and independent project reviews. So we will review anything that is written on a smart contract, an EVM-compatible smart contract. Sorry, we don't do Rust yet. But if you have a contract for an NFT, for a token, for a game, for a yield farm, or for a DEX or an aggregator or a swap or anything, you can just come to us and give us the contracts. We will review it for free within 36 hours. So we can tell you what is exactly in those contracts, because remember, what is encoded in the contract tells you exactly what can and cannot be done. So this allows us to create a risk profile. It doesn't say necessarily that something is a scam, right? We can go through a contract and find some high-risk elements, and that project is completely fine. But we can basically say what a project can and cannot do, not what they will or will not do, if that makes sense. How do we make DeFi safe? Well, on top of providing these free independent reviews, we provide tools. So if you've ever needed to emergency withdraw for something, or perhaps one of your independent DEXs falls down, we have tools that will emergency withdraw, that will revoke your permissions, that will break up your LP pairs if a DEX shuts down or rugs or goes away. We provide education, and of course our reviews. And so these are the things that we provide to our users. These are things that are always free, because we want to make sure that the DeFi community is as educated and empowered as they can. My philosophy behind why I do what I do and why we do what we do here at Rugdock is behind the fact that DeFi is wonderful and has so much potential, but I ultimately think its downfall would be if people just feel so burnt out and feel so dejected that they cannot trust in DeFi and they do not want to invest. I don't think it has anything to do with the technology. I think it's completely a psychological and morale problem. It's a hypothetical. Obviously, it's booming, but I think if it were to run into problems, it's a morale issue. And so that's why we want to make sure that people have the tools and have the access to be able to invest as securely according to their risk profile as they can. We also help developers, though, because the two go hand in hand. People who want to invest in DeFi, that's going to be coupled to people who are developing in DeFi. And we want developers to be able to develop safely. And we want to turn some users into developers, right? Because you, the investor, you know what you want to see. It's completely reasonable for you to learn the technical details and become a developer yourself. So for developers, we provide an audit service through Paladin Blockchain Security. We provide security suite services. Maybe you don't need a full audit, but you need some help. You don't really know what you're doing, or you found some problems. Someone cashed in that bug bounty and they pointed out a giant problem in your contract. We will do consultations and we want to help you patch your contract. We love patching contracts. That is one of the highlights of what I enjoy doing. I love being able to fix something that goes wrong or could go wrong. And of course, we provide security suite services like liquidity locking, like KYC services, like all of these little things that might help your users buy into your project a little more. So that's the broad overview of what we do and why. So we've been partners with Avalanche since August, I believe. So it's been 7 months of an official partnership, and we've really been committed to making Avalanche safer. We wanted, before they were even launching and building on-chain, we wanted to make sure that users knew what was going on, that they knew we were a resource, that they could get their contracts checked, and that they could come and look at our wiki and look at tutorials and figure out how to connect and do all of the things that they want to do to be empowered investors. So far, in 7 months, we have reviewed 172 Avalanche projects, and again, they're going to be everything from games to tokens to farms to dexes and everything in between. Of those 172, we flagged 32 of them as high risk, and high risk means that it contains code that could potentially result in financial loss. It does not necessarily mean it will, but it means that there are encoded elements that have high risk to them for a user. And out of all of those 32 that we flagged as high risk, and most of them before any real scam could occur, only one is still active today. So the rest of them more or less shut down, and many of those were scams. On average, there's a 3 to 5 day lag time between a high-risk review being published on our website and the actual scam occurring. This can be everything from liquidity being pulled, right? One of those soft drugs where all of a sudden your tokens are just worth it or worthless and there's no liquidity and you can't cash out anyways, or just from a straight up hard rug that results in complete loss. During our KYC process, we had one project, Zenex DAO, who provided us false information that we were able to flag, and we found that they were linked to another high-risk project that actually did pull a pretty reasonable scam, Farmers DAO. Both of those are dead, and nobody really wound up investing in the second one after we flagged that. And then as of today, we've reviewed over 2,700 projects across all EVM networks, again, for free. So if you want to see more than 172 Avalanche projects, just come on over and request it. How do we actually go about evaluating our project? I talked a little bit about how these smart contracts contain everything the project can and cannot do. But let's start from the real basics. You, the user, requests a review. So you're going to give us those contracts and you're just going to come on into our Telegram or our Discord channel and you're just going to say, hello, fill out our form. We have a nice form that you can ask any one of our wonderful admins or request yourself. And it'll just ask you to fill out the contract, the chain, the name, the date launch, and all sorts of other information that we don't necessarily need, but you can feel free to fill out so we can use other services like our launch calendar. Requests are then logged into a database, and then we have a very large review team who scans and reviews the codes. And they're just going to go through and they're going to create a diff check, more or less. So we're just going to go ahead and we have a big library full of scams and full of base codes. Because a lot of projects in DeFi are not really that novel, right? They're usually forks of each other, or which means that it's almost a straight exact copy, or they're going to be heavily influenced from previous projects that have worked. So we have a database that pretty much just matches whatever you've given us with the closest base that we can find. And then we just use a text analyzer to go through and figure out what was changed. So in this one, we can see that the base code is missing a couple of these sections. So we can see that there are 4 new sections that have been added to this code, which means that we just have to look at the differences and we can figure out exactly what the changes mean. And we can do this quickly, and that's why our things are free and they are done fast within 36 hours, because we can just go through our library, flag malicious code, flag the differences, and then humans will look over the differences, because trying to automate this usually does not work, because humans are ingenious. Humans are very good. We are creative and we are excellent at just finding ways to evade AI. So if you have AI just creeping through your codes trying to flag things, they're going to miss something when that new scammer just changes a library, or they just change the vocabulary that's used, right? Because a computer isn't that smart. If they're looking for a specific library and that library is just slightly changed, it's going to evade it. So anyways, we have a large review team full of humans and we pore through the differences of the code. So some of the more common things that we flag as malicious, or not necessarily malicious, but high risk, are going to be features like deposit and transfer fees. Maybe it's going to have weird tokenomics, like we'll run it through our honeypot tool and we'll see that it can't be sold, or that there's 80% of the token held by one wallet. common bugs, migrator functions. Migrator functions are a big one. So yeah, we just run it through our base. What are some red flags for you, the user? We like to say the code is queen over at Rugdock because, like I said, the code is going to tell you exactly what can and cannot be done. So ultimately, the best way for you to find red flags are going to be to figure out what a code can or cannot do to you. But aside from that, there are some softer factors, right? So we can look at the socials and community activity. We can see that if a chat seems pretty desolate, or if a developer doesn't seem to be particularly forthright about answering questions, or maybe likes to ban a lot of people for asking stickier questions, that could be a red flag. Developer history, also something that you probably want to know. If the developer has made something before and it's successful, awesome, great. Maybe you have a little bit more faith that they're going to make something that is honest and awesome again. But maybe that wallet that ultimately funded your new project can be connected to something that's not so awesome. Maybe it's connected to a series of just liquidity pull scams. Well, that's a red flag. A sudden stealth launch, sometimes this is cool because it'll evade your bots, but sometimes it's just a great way to be able to steal money real quick, especially if it's connected to a pre-sale, out of nowhere, just this weird little chat arises and they say, send money and we're going to give you these new fresh tokens. And then literally 2 hours later, they're just gone, right? So that's something to think about too. Unverified contracts. If you click on the contract that you're interacting with and you can't read it, if it's just a pile of bytecode, that's not great because who knows what's in it? Anything could be in that. If you can't read it, nobody can read it. And it could be hiding all sorts of goodies. Also, verifying contracts is so easy on Avalanche and every other EVM chain. It takes 5 minutes tops. So if somebody says that something can't be unverified, they're lying to you. Proxy contracts can be awesome. Proxy contracts basically let you upload a new type of a contract into a contract. This is great for fast upgrades and complicated protocols. But you know what? It's also a great way to show one sort of contract and then quickly upload something that could be a scam. We flag these as high risk, even though they have plenty of legitimate uses, just because you don't know what your proxy is going to be. It could be anything. It could be awesome, or it could just steal your funds. Migrators, same thing. They can be great, right? If you're trying to upgrade from one contract to another, a migrator can be a great tool to do that. However, a migrator can also just migrate out all of your user funds. So it's something that we like to flag as high risk, and you can figure out if you think it's a high risk function or not. I will also add for migrators, if a developer says that it's needed, they generally aren't, because there's tools like proxy contracts and just other migratory tools, even manual migrations. We've seen many protocols where you just have to unstake your funds and then restake them somewhere else. You don't need to have a migrator code in your code to do that. And honestly, migrator codes are one of the easiest, biggest scams that we've seen. So 90% of our flags for migrator codes, they've rugged, basically. So there's only 2 in all of the 2,700 that we've reviewed, because we've reviewed 2,700 contracts. Of those, we have a certain percent that we flagged for migrators. Of those, only 2 are active, so all of the rest have actually become scams. And like I said, it's because it's a very easy code to use. You throw in a migrator, it just migrates your funds out. It's so brainless. In terms of migrator-related alerts, we've had several of them. One of them actually redirected users to a McDonald's career website, which was a nice touch. We found that June and July in this last year were the busiest month for our alerts because we put out 65 alerts in those months, more than one a day. Scams have greatly decreased since, and I like to think it's because we've been around. So in June and July, we were brand new. We had barely gotten started. People didn't really know about us. People weren't really requesting contracts. So when we started to get going, it was still really easy to just have these devastating hard rugs back in June and July. It seemed like, for me as an investor, every 5th contract that I could have interacted with and that I wanted to invest in was just a brainless scam, usually a migrator scam or something like that. So I like to think, since we've been around and we've been more active and the community has found us and the community has been requesting all of these free reviews, it's a lot harder to just steal user funds now. You have to be a little more creative. You can't just like easily swap something out and steal things like with the same sort of pace and get the same gains that you used to. We also used to see back over the summer, especially in this like May, June, July period, a lot of our scams were for huge amounts of funds. It was just complete total losses that were everywhere from like 700,000 to like $7 million on average. Now, a lot of times these scams, they'll pull for like $3,000 or $1,500. We've even seen some that pull a scam for like $200. So, because again, it's a lot harder now to go ahead and steal because the community is more aware that contracts are important. They need to have their contracts checked, and we'll do it for them. So, feels good to make it a little harder to scam. Some more soft elements that you're going to want to think about are going to be your tokenomics, right? You don't need to understand all of the nitty-gritty of tokenomics, but you should know how many coins there are, what their emissions rate are, because the more they emit, the more there are, the more your market cap's going to get diluted, the less valuable your token is going to be, unless you have a huge number of users coming in and buying more of these tokens. You probably want to be aware of what the treasury team and marketing expenses are. Conversely with that, what are the taxes? So, you know, if you're buying or selling a token, a lot of times there might be a tax. How much is that tax? Because that's something that you need to think about as a user, because if you're going to be a 20% tax on your token, that means to be profitable, you need this thing to go up at least 21%, right? Are contracts audited? This is incredibly important to make sure that, you know, exploits are not quite as easy. Who are the team? Do you know who they are? Are they an anonymous team? Because an anonymous team isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it makes it a lot easier to scam and go away than if you know who the team is. You know, are there transfers in there? What is the use case? What's the team community dynamic? Are people having productive conversations? And then how did you get from A to B? So if you have a project that you know is going to require a bridge to go to some new network or to go to some new chain, right? You're going to be racking up risk with every transaction that you make. So if you need to bridge something, or if you need to swap something, or if you need to make some other third-party interaction, you're, you know, ultimately introducing yet another level of risk into whatever you're trying to accomplish. So it's something to think about, although it may not necessarily result in any sort of a risk to you at that time. All right, so we see a lot of common mistakes in users, such as putting in more money than you can afford to lose, especially without doing research, right? You really do need to understand what your risk tolerance is. It is so important that if you only have, you know, $100 to pay your bills of buffer every month, you shouldn't be playing with $100 because that can go south so fast in DeFi. Don't necessarily trust a project's team for their word only. You know, you need to at least be able to try and objectively back up what people are saying, because people can tell you anything, especially if they're an anonymous person. Don't tie your emotions to the size of your bags. Try and be logical. There's a saying, at least in TradFi, that you should be investing like a robot. And that is so true, because if you're using your emotions, that's how you're going to do this whole entire like panic buy, panic sell. And it rarely works out well if you're doing that. Don't put all your funds in one place. So if you have a bag size of $100, right, and that's a reasonable one for you, but you put $100 all into one exact place, and that thing is exploited, you have lost 100% of your $100. If you break up that into a couple different protocols and one or two of them gets exploited, you've only lost 5% or 10%. And that is a very recoverable amount in DeFi, right? You know, depending on what you do, it is so simple to make up 10%. Even if it might take you a little bit extra time versus trying to go from zero all the way back to what you had. And you know what? Thinking that you're going to get $1 million and like retire forever off of some like random token play, probably not realistic. So, you know, maybe just be cognizant of how you're investing and just check that. Some more advice, like I said, split your bags. Make sure that everything is put so that you're not facing a completely devastating loss in the event something happens. Learn how impermanent loss works. We have plenty of great articles on our wiki, wiki.rugdoc.io. that'll tell you all about impermanent loss and calculations, because when you're making a liquidity pair and one thing goes very up or one thing goes very down, the funds you put in and the funds you're expecting may have absolutely nothing to do with each other. If you're brand new, watch on the sidelines until you're comfortable. Play around on something more established and safer, like Trader Joe, right? You don't want to be like hopping around into like the newest NFT or into the newest random token play until you really have a feeling for like how this all works. Ask questions. We'll answer your questions. Lots of communities will answer your questions, but we definitely will answer your questions. So if you pop into our Discord or our Telegram and you want to know how something works, we will do our best to tell you how that thing works. We also keep a wiki, then a really comprehensive wiki at that, of all sorts of tutorials and methods and rugs and codes and all sorts of things that will make you hopefully a better investor. When you're thinking of a risk strategy, make it around the premise that whatever you're investing in is going to fail, because that's going to make you more conservative, and that's going to make you probably the better investor, because if that thing does indeed fail, you hopefully have a plan for it then, and the failure will not be quite so devastating. But if it takes off and it works great, you're in an awesome position regardless, right? So it's a way to mitigate your loss and maximize your returns. And then finally, you can also use free text analysis tools like DiffChecker to actually do your own research. Of course, we are happy to read your contracts for you, but even better than us reading contracts for you is you reading contracts for you. If you figure out how to basically find the differences between code bases and then flag for common exploits, which we actually have in our wiki, that's just an extra level of you feeling good about whatever you're trying to do. And with that, that's all I got. If anybody has questions, I can probably answer a few. You.
Can I ask a question? Okay.
Sure.
Is Rugdock making money?
Yes. Yes. So we don't keep a token or a farm because we think that that would be compromising, right? That would put some sort of inherent bias into our reviews, and we really are trying to remain independent. So we run advertising for projects that qualify. If your project is flagged as medium risk, low risk, some risk, just a lower category of risk, and we feel reasonably confident that you cannot contractually scam your users, you can advertise, and our site gets a lot of traffic. Our site gets 230,000 unique visitors, I believe, a month. So, we're regularly seeing like 10,000 unique visitors a day. We have like advertising statistics. We have 30% click through because our community is really targeted. If you're somebody who's coming to our website to look at contract scores, you're someone who really wants to like ape into these like new projects. So that's how we monetize. Also, consulting services, our security suite services, so anything that we're going above and beyond to help developers with, we monetize that because we really want to make sure everything user-oriented is free.
The KYC service are also for US user or excluded the US user?
Nope, we work with a third-party provider to make sure that we're compliant with US and EU regulations. So we will KYC both EU and US.
Even over $10,000 or?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So that is another service.
Yep, that's one of our security suite services developers that we do charge for.